All right, welcome back to another very special episode of Dr. J Radio Live. Of course, I'm your host, Dr. J, broadcasting from the City of Angels. Although it does not seem very angelic anymore, and what's happening lately in California has given me plenty of reason to want to move to a more red state. If those of you internationally don't know what red and blue states are, well, I'll let you figure that out on your own, and you'll be surprised to see how vast differences there are. Now, today we have a very special guest, a great friend of mine, a very, very super intellectual mind. He is a New York Times bestselling author of a ton of great books. The last two books that I had him on for was Killing the Deep State, which is obviously, again, another New York Times bestseller. So much so that I got 3 copies of that book. One, obviously, for myself, and after I'd read it, I distributed 2 other copies to people that I felt should read it. I also had him back not too long after he was harassed by Robert Mueller and his team in the special counsel's office. And if you recall, after that, we had a short interview about his book, Silent No More. Now, that's given you enough clues, so let me bring on the one and only Dr. Jerome Corsi PhD. Dr. Corsi, welcome back.
Great to be back with you, Dr. J. Thank you.
It's always a pleasure to speak to you on air and off of air, and I have to say I am very scared with what's been happening lately. We had the so-called Summer of Love here up north from me in Seattle. It seems to me, if you recall, 2 years ago, we were first talking about Antifa. I never thought Antifa would literally take over the entire United States. That's what it seems like to me.
Well, it looks like they have. I mean, we're facing it. This is really an insurrection that we're facing right now, and we might as well just kind of be clear about it, that it is an insurrection. And what you're facing is a Maoist movement. These are Maoists. Black Lives Matters is a Maoist organization and has been since its founding, and it's run by Maoist organizations, these Freedom Liberation Road organizations, which are, again, hard left, very well funded. And the 3 women who have created it are radicals. It doesn't have anything to do with racial justice. This has to do with using race as a political tool in order to radicalize people and create violence. It's a whole methodology that was used to topple regimes that was developed by the hard left going back into the 60s and 70s with Bill Ayers and the Weathermen and the SDS and all those groups. And they're still behind, one of the women who was part of that whole network in the 70s is also running this organization that's used to funnel money into 1,000 Currents, it's called. They have a whole funding scheme where Act Blue is a funnel. It gets all this money in, and it goes through other organizations below it, and then it ends up at Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter is not a charity. It's not officially or legally registered as a charity. And the whole thing is a scam, but it's a hard left scam, taking a knee to the black race and saying black race should be supreme or supremacy, and this white privilege being virtually a crime because you're born white. That's reverse racism, and that's the kind of destructive force that will ultimately lead, and they're trying to use it to destroy President Trump and to actually destroy the United States of America as a constitutional republic.
One of the tweets by Sean King, which really, really got to me, it just shows me how far this group is willing to go, was about destroying statues and stained glass of so-called, quote, white Jesus, his European mother, and friends. I was like, whoa, okay, now they want to destroy 2,000 years of a religion. I don't think at that point anything's going to stop.
Well, what you have here is a situation. I write about it in this ebook on my Corsi Nation website, and the book is the plan to remove Donald Trump from the presidency. And I lay out that what we've been experiencing is you got to look at this all together. We first had the Russian collusion. Well, Mueller reported there was no Russian collusion. But they still keep trying that again and again and again. Ukraine, same thing. We didn't have any, and there was no there on Ukraine, but yet we had a trial in the Senate to impeach Donald Trump in February. It's hard even to remember that happened, given how these news cycles are so dominant and echo chamber one thing after another. Then we get COVID-19, and COVID-19 immediately we go into quarantine. And that's, again, a strategy which is not the typical strategy. Usually in a health emergency, you quarantine the ill, the sick. You don't quarantine the healthy, but shutting down the economy. And then we have all these in the streets violence. They find an incident with this George Floyd. I'm sure they were looking for that kind of an incident. It will go on. I predicted in this ebook we're going to have the 25th Amendment invoked to try to remove Donald Trump. We've got Bolton's book. The themes are being developed that Donald Trump is really mentally not capable of being president, and that theme's been around in the Democrats' toolbox since 2017. This stuff now, the Democrats, the hard left has just gone in, and the Democrats are no longer traditional Democrats. They're now controlled by the radical Democrat socialists, which are more like AOC. They're Marxists or Maoists, and they intend to destroy the United States. They're all in. Like in poker, they're putting all their chips in the middle of the table. They're going to play this hand, win or lose, because the hard left knows it cannot survive a second term of Donald Trump. He's too disruptive to their agenda, and they're going to try and get rid of Donald Trump right now and win.
Internationally, I have friends in India, UK, Australia, and we are the laughing stock of the world when it comes to Joe Biden. I mean, they literally are calling us buffoons, and openly too. If you watch Sky News in Australia, they're constantly, every time he makes another gaffe, and they're saying, this is the face of the leftist party. And part of me thinks that they're doing that on purpose, that they're going to rig the election, and they're going to say, look, we can get Mr. Alzheimer's in here and beat Trump because we control the world.
Well, it's, the fact of Joe Biden being the candidate, I don't think it's likely that Joe Biden is going to be president for very long. I mean, the Democrats are putting him in as kind of a placeholder because they want to appeal to voters who want to remember the Democratic Party the way it used to be. Joe Biden's been in politics for a long time, but the party of Jack Kennedy, Democratic Party, or Hubert Humphrey, that's long gone. This is the party of Karl Marx, and they intend to create a revolutionary communist society here, which will be impossible to live in. This is like the Red Guard that was charging through China in Mao's early part of his reign, the 60s and 70s. The Red Guard just about destroyed China, because you have these youth running wild. It's like the madness of the French Revolution, with Robespierre and all these people guillotining everyone. It's a form of insanity that we go through as a species, I guess, every so often. But now with nuclear weapons in the arsenal, I see we're in the beginning of World War III with China, and the way it could end is not very pretty if, in fact, China looks like it's going to lose, or, I just continue to think the dangers that we're facing are as great as we've ever faced as a nation. And maybe this is the final test as to whether or not a nation with freedoms as we've crafted them, our founding fathers, whether that's ever going to long endure. And we're back at Lincoln's question, we're testing whether this nation or any nation so constituted can long endure. We're still testing that proposition.
When it comes to China, using all the indicators, in your opinion, do you think we're heading towards World War III? Because the fact that we're slapping tariffs on them to try to even out the scales of balance for trade. One thing, of course, which became apparent during the shutdown, which as you mentioned, was very unnecessary for those who are not sick, is that so many goods that normally would be in our stores, our pharmacies, etc., all of a sudden disappeared because that's when we realized the scope at how much China has really infiltrated our commerce.
You've got you've got a situation where China has got a really very fragile economy. They don't have a strong economy. And so with China, if we, as we have, we've said we're going to end the unfair trade advantages. We're going to demand that China stop manipulating their currency to create an unfair advantage for their exports. We've imposed tariffs. We've threatened to get China out of the World Health Organization, that it dominates like a mercantile country. And so basically, I think we're at the point where China is going to have famine by the end of this year if they don't start something. And what we're facing is the potential, I believe, of China seeing that the Communist Chinese could lose power, and rather than lose power, they're going to go to war with the United States. That's a way to keep power. I think they're well along the way of doing it.
Now, let me go back to the socialism Marxist idea that the Justice Democrats, the ultra radicals, the AOCs, etc., that are pushing. It's almost as if that generation did not learn history, going back to, Lenin and Stalin. Or what about the Nazi Party? They're talking about National Socialism. I think people forget that Nazi actually stood for National Socialist Party. And this is the party they're trying to implement here. It just boggles my mind that history repeats itself. There are blatant examples that this history did not go well, and that's what's being trying to implement in this country.
Well, and I think we're basically going along a path where if we look, it reminds me of the Arab Spring. This is one of the models where this violence was tried. And so you go into Tahrir Square in Egypt, 2011, when Mubarak was deposed. And again, it was Obama who was architecting it with the State Department and lots of money. So these protests begin in Tahrir Square, and then they get radicalized. A group of Mubarak supporters comes in camels and begins injuring and killing a few people in this crowd, which is prolonged protest, weeks and weeks and weeks of protest, and covered by the media. And then it turns violent. So you get the police come in, clashes with the police, tear gas, people get hurt, and Mubarak ultimately resigns. Now, in Egypt, they came in with the Muslim Brotherhood, the hard left, the basic terrorists, and it wasn't until el-Sisi in a military coup took over and basically criminalized the entire Muslim Brotherhood organization that Egypt returned any kind of normalcy. In Ukraine, same thing, weeks and weeks and weeks of this protest in Maidan Square, which is a big plaza in Kiev, the capital. They want to get rid of Yanukovych in 2014, who was the president who was loyal to Russia. And they had all this protest activity against Yanukovych. Soros was funding it. Obama was funding it. The State Department was involved. And they were all wanting to get rid of Yanukovych. So their snipers came on, and they killed 50 people in the crowd. They blamed it on Yanukovych. Well, again, it went insane. You had tear gas, you had fighting, you had the police coming in, you had the military coming in, and Yanukovych flees the country, and he goes to Russia. And they get their new leader, Poroshenko, who's from Western Ukraine, and basically a Nazi whom the State Department was supporting because they wanted Ukraine to go into NATO and to the EU. And be in opposition to Russia. That was the plan that Obama was seemingly implementing. At any rate, this is a pattern of violence which is architected. And being architected like this, it can be used to produce an effect. And that's the whole point, is that this is, you wait for a George Floyd incident to occur. It gets videotaped. You've got to have the videotape. And on that, you can pounce on it immediately and say, look at the white police, how brutal they are. There's only about 10 of these instances in a year where a unarmed black in an encounter with a white police gets killed. And, the typical murderers in the black community are blacks killing blacks. But again, this is the racially charged incident that these radicals can pick up and mobilize an army of people who legitimately want racial justice and are offended by this, but don't understand the extent to which they're being manipulated. And it's a race consciousness which is meant to demonize the United States, to demonize all of our values, to say we're a slave state, and tear down the statues, and then destroy history. These are the things that have been done over and over again in history, going back to, Russia and its revolution, or the violence in the Weimar Republic between the Nazi brown shirts and Antifa, who was a communist thug organization. The current Antifa is a model after that Antifa. And again, I'm saying people have got the whole point of my e-book here on this plan to remove Donald Trump from the presidency is to stop seeing it as if it's happening spontaneously, and to understand it's orchestrated together with the mainstream media that develops these narratives and echo chambers them. So for a week, all you hear is this theme, and it's over and over and over again, and try to get it amplified. And if they do it long and hard enough people end up believing it, even if there's no basis in truth for the Russian collusion or any of these other themes that they want to, taking the police, defunding the police is insane. What are you going to have? Antifa show up as the fire department? So, they can ransack the house and harass your family and see if you got any books they don't like, and if you do, they can burn the house to the ground. That's the fire department under Antifa.
Minneapolis, as you know, has already stated that they're going to defund the police. Yet, I think it was the last week, maybe two tops, they had private security for their city council run over $63,000. That just goes to show the dichotomy of, okay, so that they're protected, but what happens when the rest of the people are assaulted? Who are they going to call? Antifa or a social worker? It doesn't work like that.
Precisely. That's the problem. And when you deal with one of these situations, and you see that the goal is to demonize the police and deal with fundamentally reducing a city to being controlled by these violent thugs, that's the disorder, that's the chaos that the hard left wants to create in order to produce a revolutionary political change. Just give them power and this stops. Just buy into their agenda. And they use extortion. So they say to Wendy's, well, George Floyd went to sleep in a Wendy's drive-in line. That's how the incident started. And so now they occupy in that Wendy's, Antifa and Black Lives Matter, and they say to Wendy's, we can destroy your entire chain. We can take down all the Wendy's all over the country and burn them down. Or take a knee to Antifa and to Black Lives Matter and pay us a lot of money. And corporation after corporation, then in political correctness, doesn't want to be called racist. And so you've got a whole narrative here that, looked at rationally, would be seen as an extortion scheme, a protection racket. And again, that's not lawful. And Antifa, when it gets this money, is not a registered charity. But our law enforcement has become so politicized and so weaponized that even the Department of Justice seems to do nothing.
I have two questions in the chat for you. They're about topics that I think are relevant. This first one is about breaking news today, which I'm sure you heard about, Ghislaine Maxwell. This comes from Dezombified. Let me read it to you. Any thoughts on Epstein's being arrested?
Well, I think she must have made some kind of a deal coming back to the United States and being where she could be arrested. The Maxwell, she is a character. I mean, she has been with Epstein and his arranger, his fixer with these underage girls. At the heart of this is the Clintons, and I would think they should be part of the ones who were worried. There was an attempt by Anonymous, this murky kind of group on the internet, to attach this to Donald Trump, Epstein to Donald Trump, but the basis of it was so thin that it hasn't gone anywhere. And yet I don't think, you can't rule out that the next thing they'll try to do is to say that Donald Trump was in league with Russia to Hyde working with Epstein or something of that nature. They'll work out some narrative with it. It's just it doesn't work. So I think the key is that if there is an investigation, I think that's why Berman was fired, the U.S. Attorney in the Southern District of New York. I think he was still going after Donald Trump. And this investigation done legitimately has got to go after the Clintons and all the other elite leftists who were together with Epstein in their pedophilia.
And we do know from records that Bill Clinton flew to Little St. James on Epstein's private jet, I believe, 26 times. And the public knowledge that I know that Donald Trump knew Epstein, as billionaires normally do, maybe not nearly as close as Bill Clinton, but the falling out happened because Epstein hit on an employee's daughter, an underage daughter at Mar-a-Lago, and that's when the fallout happened. And I think this was even before the first arrest, which was the sweetheart deal of Epstein. So you're absolutely right. For them to chase our president down is just more bogus nonsense.
Yeah,
okay.
The history is that Donald Trump threw Epstein out of the club, didn't want to have anything to do with him. And it's just not Donald Trump's scene. I mean, I don't see any evidence in Donald Trump's background in New York. And I've known him, not well, but I've known him in business for 40 years. And it's just, with the Clintons, you can imagine it being true. And it was plenty of talk about the Clintons on sex and all the other things they were doing. But not with Donald Trump. He has always more liked these models and the beauty pageants, and that's more been the type of woman he seems to have been attracted to.
Adults at that too, right?
Adults,
yeah
adults, not children.
Yes. Okay, these two-part question. This is from Lasha Senyak. What does he think of Putin becoming leader for 2 more terms?
Well, I mean, Putin is very clearly wanting to be more powerful. He wants Russia to be more powerful. I think he fancies himself as emperor of the world. And if you have China going after the United States, and we're both diminished in power because of the conflict, China's now not only COVID being launched, but maybe another one that appears to be coming out of China, a different virus. They're saying it comes from salmon, from fish, not from bats. Well, they were lying the first time, but it's different. It's got a different name to it, a different idea to it. So we're going to find out what that is. And then China takes over Hong Kong, and they threaten Taiwan. They become belligerent in the South China Sea. They seemingly are ready to go to war with India. China has been more aggressive and more outside the normal international order ever since President Trump has been putting pressure on China over its unfair trade practices. And as we withdraw and relocate the outsourcing, which I always thought was a bad mistake, China's going to be very badly hurt economically. And so if the two of China and the United States fight out this type of a continuing, prolonged conflict, even if it's not a shooting war, Russia can just take on whichever one emerges as the winner and beat them, because both China and the United States be diminished. And I'm sure Putin is calculating these kinds of advantages.
Now, here's the second part to the question, and after that, I'll take one more, and then I know we'll wrap so we could finish in time for your next engagement. Should the U.S. abolish term limits to the presidency, too? That's asked by the same person, Lasha Senyak.
It's a hard question to answer. These term limits got put in when Franklin Roosevelt won 4 terms, and the sitting president has enormous edges on winning again because of name recognition. People are used to the president. Bill Clinton, I think, could have been reelected. I think a third time. I think Barack Obama could have been reelected a third time. I think Donald Trump, the odds are, will be reelected, but this massive campaign to diminish Donald Trump has never been waged against the modern president. We're not yet certain what the outcome will be.
And let's also mention the fact that I have never ever seen in history a sitting president getting attacked by the last president. Clinton finishes, right? You have George W. or Herbert Walker, or sorry, the son, W. Bush. Clinton is in the background. He doesn't really say a word. It's just the norm, and except for now.
Well, that's clearly an issue, and you clearly have right now a situation where Obama, behind the scenes, seems like he would like to be still president and is still trying to complete his dream of transforming the United States into a socialist communist country. And Obama also is fearful that enough evidence has now come out, and we've seen it with John Radcliffe continuing as Director of National Intelligence, what Acting Director of National Intelligence Grinnell had started, and that is releasing information which implicates Barack Obama in the conspiracy to go after General Flynn. And as this evidence begins to come out more clearly, I think Obama is rightly concerned that in his second term of Donald Trump, the conspirators who tried to oust a coup d'etat, that's my most recent hardcover book on the coup d'etat, I think they're afraid that they will be caught and punished. So it's really we're in a kind of, a death match here. This is going to be a fight that's not only a grudge match, but it's going to be fought until the death. And I don't see the Democrats quitting, and I don't see Donald Trump quitting. And, the American people are going to have to decide, because the Democrats are running in the street their 2020 presidential campaign. If this is the future that you want, the Democrats have now shown you what they intend to do. And if we want Antifa ruling the streets and Black Lives Matter and cities shut down and all the difficulties economically, and we can't keep spending trillions of dollars that we just hypothecate, make up in fiat currency. Every country that's tried that has ended up in hyperinflation. So we're at a very serious point in history where the left has just decided to go for broke.
Now, we've been talking for a few years indictments that will come across Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, John Brennan, and Clapper, Andrew McCabe, hopefully Biden and Obama, although A.G. Barr did say he doesn't want to set that precedent. In your opinion, Dr. Corsi, do you think that we will see indictments, or is this just going to get brushed under the rug and it's going to be business as usual from the next 4 years and then 8 years and so on and so forth?
Well, I've been concerned about Attorney General Barr because he's not brought indictments. And this would be a time to bring indictments, even to change the narrative of what's going on politically. But also, you can't just keep investigating until everybody's dead. If John Durham, the prosecutor, the U.S. attorney who's really looking into what I call coup d'etat, the Russian collusion narrative, you're going to, I think, have indictments, but it's going to take Barr deciding he can't protect the Justice Department. And Barr has not yet even fired all the Mueller prosecutors that were there. Van Grack, who was the prosecutor that went after General Flynn, is still an employee of the Department of Justice. So is Aaron Zelinsky, who was the one who wanted to come after me during the Mueller investigation. And I think both of them were suborning perjury, saying to me, I refused to do their plea deal, but the threat was they were going to indict me for, in a Washington court that would hate me, and I'd get a 25-year sentence. I'd die in prison. But I wouldn't swear to a lie. I wouldn't swear a lie to something I hadn't done. So, General Flynn, they put a gun to his son's head and said, we'll pull the trigger unless you sign this paper. That's like the KGB would do. It's like the Gestapo would do. This is not the United States of America, and we still have politicized justice in the Justice Department. And it's tough for Donald Trump to get a hold of it when every one of these departments is packed with Obama globalists and, people who are sympathetic to the left's causes coming out of the universities. The country has done an awfully lot of indoctrination of a whole generation of people who are into this leftist globalist ideology, and they don't know the American history or the principles of our American government. And so I think it's a very desperate time right now.
When I found out that it was the Logan Act they tried to prosecute General Flynn on, and also about the notes that were finally uncovered from Peter Strzok, I called Joseph Flynn, and of course, obviously, he had been angry because he had known more than I had known because of the public knowledge. And I have to tell you, that conversation we both were very angry at what this country could do to a lieutenant general. Real quick, Let me ask your opinion in case I don't have a chance to have you publicly on before the election. And if you had to guess today what the October surprise would be on both sides, what do you think it would be?
That's a hard question to ask. I mean, to answer, I don't know what's being planned. I think the October surprise is going to be the attempt to use the 25th Amendment to remove Donald Trump. And that, I think, will come up in a way where they'll have evidence and they'll be pressing for the cabinet to remove him before the election. That's what I write in this book. Again, I'm mentioning I'm very much wanting people to read this plan to remove Donald Trump for office from the presidency. Because when you read it and you get your eyes open to what's being architected here, we have a better chance to stop it.
Now, thank you, Dr. Corsi. It's always a pleasure speaking to you. Like I said, hang by for a quick moment off air. For people to find you, let's tell them where they can get your books. For instance, CorsiNation.com. I'll drop the link in there for everybody out there. You just mentioned one of the many books that you offer as ebooks. What else can people get from Corsi Nation as well as contacting you?
I'm offering all the my books on Corsi Nation. I'm the inventory of authors' copies of books I'm selling and signed, which should be collector's items, and some donations. I'm doing the Coup d'etat, my current book, and Silent No More for a $100 donation. I'll sign them and send you both books. We have a tele-MD program where you can talk to an MD, and that MD can prescribe hydroxychloroquine and zinc and antibiotics for you for COVID, even for prevention, provided it's within your needs. It's still, I'm not selling the drugs. We can get a interview with a MD, this tele-MD program on CorsiNation.com, who can arrange for you to get hydroxychloroquine and filled by a pharmacy that can fulfill the prescription if you need it. And there's lots of videos on CorsiNation.com covering lots of subjects, including this current Black Lives Matter, Antifa, COVID. I've got a book on COVID-20, an ebook on what I see as the next virus that could potentially be developed and launched. And it's becoming a very popular website, and I'm very pleased with the public reaction to it.